Greetings, everyone. We are so glad you're here with us. This is Ronnie Bincer, your Hangout helper. This particular show we're calling Hangout Tech Talk, and it's sponsored by what you see right behind me, the Hangout Mastery Membership Group. It's a wonderful place where you can join in with other people that run Hangouts on Air and learn together, test together, and keep up with all the constant changes. And that's why I run that particular group. I want to say hello to all of you out there, and thank you for watching live. And also I want to just mention real fast who our featured guests are. Then I'm going to read some of the things they've written, which has been the inspiration for this particular show. And then we'll get into the live interaction and the broadcast and all the good stuff. So we will take your comments, bring them right onto the screen if you've got them, and questions as well. So please interact with us while we're live. So Mark, I just want to say I'm highlighting you right now, just so you can give us your Christmas and holiday greetings or something like that.
Well, holiday greetings to everybody out there in Hangout land. Always a joy any time of year to be with both of these guys, Ronnie Bincer, who I really recommend the Hangout Mastery courses and groups that he runs if you want to learn about Hangouts, and with David Amerland, who wrote a book on Hangouts. So we're talking about the power of the personal here, getting personal online. Few better ways to do that than through Hangouts. So great to be with you, Ronnie and David.
Thanks, Mark. And yes, I do plan on trying to bring in the idea of Hangouts in the ability to be personal as a brand online. That's going to be a big part of it. But I do want to reference David right now. Hello, David.
Oh, hi, and I'm so glad to be here. And again, I echo Mark here. I mean, every time we get together, first of all, it's a privilege and an honor. But I think the insights that the synthesis provides are fairly unique, and it wouldn't be possible in any other scenario or through any other medium than a Hangout.
Excellent. So we will discuss the idea of brands getting personal online and how using this particular tool, Hangouts and Hangouts on Air, is a wonderful way to allow that to happen, sort of a vehicle to make that possible. But before I got too far into that part, I wanted to read some of the things that were written by these gentlemen just to make sure everybody's up to speed with what the topic is we're talking about. So David, I'm going to highlight you for a moment while I turn on the screen share of your article. And I'm going to leave you guys visible in the film strip so people can watch your expressions on your faces while I read, okay? So feel free, and you can also chime in if there's something you wanted to say immediately. But here we go. I want to emphasize some of the key points that I saw in David's article, and I'm just going to pull them out and read them for you. So here we go. David says, in the offline world, marketers, just like centralized authority figures, are real. They have real reputations that can be burnt, which is always costly, and corporeal forms. By the way, I had to figure out how to say that word, corporeal. Corporeal forms that can be punished. The moment marketing reached the web, however, things changed. And in the decentralized authority figure-free world of ones and zeros, there was a sense that anyone could be anyone and do anything. The freedom was exhilarating, the ability to reinvent oneself electrifying, but it also led to a distinct lack of trust. And I'm emphasizing those words, lack of trust. And then he mentioned, without trust, there can be no relational transaction of any kind. Then skipping a little further in the article, he talks about when marketing is no longer controlled by marketers, and I'll let you emphasize more with that, where that came from, David. When marketing is no longer controlled by marketers, no amount of advertising, social media posts, blogging, and paid ads is going to change the fate of a product or service that fails to be valuable to the end user. And so my little comment there is that it really, again, comes right back to trust. Trust in the brand, trust in that product, the service, and specifically trust in the person. So David, is there anything quick that you want to make reference to as to what I just read before we go into Mark's article?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What I will do is sort of add an extra level of clarification on how marketing is not controlled by marketers. And this is the world that we live in right now. It's a world where the reputation of somebody, their ability to be an authority or not on a subject, their ability to be knowledgeable or not, doesn't rest on what they say, but it rests on our own assessment of what they do, what they publish, how they act, and also the reputational value we get from other people in our circle of contacts and friends who know that person or who have had experience of their knowledge or expertise. And that's how the control, which traditionally was a very top-down affair of any kind of brand, has now been lost. And whether that brand is a single person or a company, they're swimming in the same sort of a swimming pool, basically, and facing the same problem, that they now need to trust their audience to understand who they are through their actions rather than through their advertising.
Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna highlight Mark for a moment while I go to his article, and I'm gonna pull out some snippets from that. So that's coming up here. So Mark, this is your stuff. Here we go. And I pulled out a few little nuggets, and one of the nuggets is that Mark mentions, and he's said this many places, many different times, but that we're planting seeds via social. We're not necessarily trying to make everything happen on social media, but we're planting some very valuable seeds. He also referenced in this particular article the idea that EAT, E-A-T, standing for expertise, authority, and trust, and this is something that the brand can establish with the personal dimension, which he adds as the fourth dimension, along with the EAT. But I think adding a P to the end of EAT makes it harder to pronounce. EAT. Okay.
So put it at the beginning and make it Pete. I mean,
Pete. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
So I'm going to read a little from the article, just so everybody's up to speed. He mentioned that this is the primary thesis of the article, saying that your brand will most rapidly and successfully gain the social trust of its audience when it is closely associated with powerful personal brands, which I think Mark has recently referred to as PBR, personal brand representatives.
Representatives, yes, not to be confused with Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Right, okay. So then, later in the article, Mark challenges businesses to hire and or cultivate from within at least one powerful personal brand intimately associated with your brand who represents you via his or her content and social presence. Then, he says this particular person or persons need to have likability, they need to have smarts, they need to have the gift of gab, and they need to have integrity. And some thoughts that I added to that is, with so many choices of things out there on the web, we're basically battling for the attention of our viewers. So basically it comes down to who are we going to trust, and how can we easily earn that trust, or most easily earn that trust. So now I'm going to bring that back to you, Mark, for some ideas of any extras you want to add to that before we get into our full discussion.
Sure, thanks, Ronnie. I want to emphasize, first of all, that the EAT concept is not original to me. That actually comes from Google's quality guidelines that they give to the manual that they give to, some people may not be aware of this, but Google actually hires and trains real people in a very intensive training course to evaluate the quality of sampled websites in order to get a human perspective on what is quality, what is good, that they can then use to help train their algorithm. So, more and more they're not wanting to depend just on links as votes, but to really be able to say, from a machine learning standpoint, this page has the characteristics of quality content. So what I did was take those concepts, that expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, and move them into a level of saying, my article was wanting to give one way in which you could help bring that about. It's one thing to say, okay, we need expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, but how do we actually get that? How do we connect to that in the real world? How do we get the advantages that David is talking about, that brings out in the semantic search world? And one way I believe strongly that can happen is through a PBR, personal brand representative. Real people who, first of all, are the authors of your content that you produce, whatever form that is, who are speaking at conferences on your behalf, who are engaging online and in Hangouts and webinars, you get that connection with somebody. And what we've seen time and again, and we've had many examples of this, is that there actually can be a transference that takes place. Over time, people who get to like and know that personal brand representative transfer the emotions, the connections, the feelings, the expertise, the authority, the trust over to the brand that they represent. So that's my basic thesis.
So I'm going to bring up Eric's comment saying Pete. He likes Pete. He likes that. And then Phil has a comment saying that the paradox is that more brands are outsourcing their social media, many without any form of strategy. So in essence, they're making noise and diluting trust. Do either of you have any comments on that?
Yes, and I think, first of all, Phil is right. This is exactly what's happening for very understandable reasons. Brands feel that they can't handle that kind of commitment to writing and representation themselves, so they hire a professional. And this is a missed opportunity, because really this is what should happen, and it should be disruptive in the traditional sense of how this is done. The brand should find somebody who actually can understand and work very deeply with the brand, beginning an evolutionary long-term partnership where both of them are equally invested in that. So the person providing the service should be really invested in working for the brand as if they were part of it, bringing in an outside skill into the company, and the company should be treating that person as a long-term valuable skill set that's coming in to help them achieve what they can on their own. It's a missed opportunity because companies that simply outsource it on the basis of sometimes the lowest bid provider and sometimes, oh, we're going to get somebody to do it for us, are missing that kind of relationship, and they're just diluting the brand and wasting time and money and resources without actually achieving what they want.
And then they might even say it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Typically, yes.
Exactly, right. Because they're treating it, I'll just add to that they're treating social media with the old mindset. In my Moz article, I compare it to the Mad Men days when the only way to communicate with consumers for the most part was by broadcasting a message. And you could package that. You would outsource that to a Madison Avenue advertising agency that would come up with a packaged, image and message that may not be what your brand really even is in reality, your product, but it tested nicely, it made some kind of connection, so they would do that. And that's what many brands are doing, the way they're treating social media. But that's not where social media is most effective. Social media is most effective on a very personal, connected level, and that's why we're talking about these concepts of PBRs. One real quick example, and I'll go back to the Mad Men days here because I grew up in those days in the 60s, and I remember my mother, I've shared this before, my mother every week would not miss a certain radio program. Saturday mornings, there was a guy who ran a local gardening shop, and he had a Saturday morning program where for 3 hours he would answer questions on the phone. People would call in, what do I do about the aphids on my daffodils? And he would give his expert advice. My mother would travel past 9 or 10 other great garden shops to go to his shop because he had helped her so much on that broadcast. She believed that he was a real expert, and so she believed that I'm going to get the best advice, I'm going to get the best quality if I go to his garden shop, even though it's driving out of my way to go to. So just an example, even from the old world before the internet, how this personal connection with a brand can be very effective.
Now, in the green room, when we were discussing before we went live, we were talking about how you two gentlemen had met people at conferences, and that once you've made that personal connection by either interacting with them with Q&A after the fact or even just listening and watching them and seeing their passion, that's a wonderful and powerful way to gain trust and grow trust with that particular person. How is this done inside the social world instead of necessarily being at a conference?
Well, I'm very glad you asked that because essentially the only viable shortcut to achieving that is through Hangouts on Air. You could say you could use almost any video conferencing tool, but there are not many video conferencing tools that allow you to do what Hangouts do in terms of having YouTube broadcast platform and using it on a personal basis and interacting with an audience and interacting with each other the way that we do here. And in terms of a brand, I mean, in finding the person who's going to best represent your brand, having that person in a Hangout immediately produces that halo effect that Mark has spoken about, where you start trusting the person and listening to them, and at the back of your mind you associate them with the brand values and the brand voice of the company or the brand they represent. And that's the easiest win in many ways.
So, little plug for Hangouts and the way that this Hangout thing allows you to come out from behind the brand, right? I've been in Hangouts, Right. I've been in Hangouts where people don't have the camera on, and it's kind of awkward. In other words, they're not really
Just a little bit. It's like turning up wearing a mask and only your ninja mask, right?
Yeah,
Only
right.
your eyes are
Well,
visible.
I've had people ask me if you can do this, you can kind of pull this off, this personal brand representative concept that I talk about. If you could pull it off with a persona, meaning create kind of a fake person, but it's a person, and then have several people manage the account. And that I said, well, a persona can't show up at a conference, and a persona, to put the context here, can't do a hangout. A persona can't do a webinar. A persona can't really be, at some point that's going to get exposed, or it's going to reach its limit of availability. So that's, I think the value there that you've got, why it's got to be real. The second thing I want to say quickly is, in relation to this, is because it always comes up that you're talking about a real commitment here. And yes, I won't hide that. This has to be a significant commitment of time and resource. You're going to find at least one person to whom you're going to give as their major role, if not their complete role, to being online for you, to producing content, which takes time to do well and to do rightly. That is a commitment, but I think it's the brands that will put the investment into that will be the ones who will reap the rewards of it.
Right, and this particular Hangout is sort of a follow-up to another one that was run by this gentleman, John Ellis, and he's saying it's not a broadcast and it can't be a logo anymore. And I think perhaps he's mentioning it has to be a conversation or some type of a way for people that are watching to interact. And this is an article that I've had that I never published yet, okay? And here's the premise to the article, is that when you do these Hangout on Air broadcasts and you can make them interactive, you have the opportunity to build trust far, far greater than when you don't make it interactive and it's simply a broadcast. Mm-hmm. Either of you have a comment on that concept?
Yes, absolutely. That's very true. And it actually, this is a very easy statement to make, but it actually unpacks into quite an entirely different level of complexity if we look at it. Now, there's a couple of things there. First of all, the moment it's interactive, you get a sense that there's no controlling message which comes from the top down, and that's it. There's no canned content coming down at you, which means that the other person is willing also to put themselves at a certain level of risk, which is how you begin to form trust. You understand that somebody's investing something in their relationship, and therefore they would not want it to go badly, which means that it's to their best interest to make sure it's smooth, which allows you to sort of sense that this kind of vulnerability is reciprocated from your part. But the other thing is that also you can't just get into a hangout and expect everything to go smoothly if you're a professional if you haven't practiced. There has to be a level of professionalism, there has to be a level of understanding of the mechanics involved, there has to be a level of the understanding of the dynamics involved, which brings me, without trying to make a plug of it, to what you do, Ronnie, where you actually train people in this, because although we think we should be able intuitively to do it right, when we actually try to do it without training, it does become exceedingly difficult. I think, speaking for myself, we have all benefited from your advice, which has been given over the last 3 years. And if we appear accomplished at this level, it's because of your efforts as well as the practice we've actually put in.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All I'll say to that is amen.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so this tool that we're in right now is a fabulous way to build trust and present information not only for your brand, but for the person that's helping represent that brand. So let's bring the conversation back to this idea of people, and I'm going to ask both of you a question. I'll start with phrasing it to Mark. Do you believe that when this personal brand representative is doing their activity online, is there a percentage that you can sort of figure out as to how much should be industry related versus personal? Here's what I saw when I went out Christmas shopping or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we get often, and people vary on their opinions on that. There's some people that feel like you should, if you're representing a business, then your social account should never be personal. Personal in terms of like just talking about things like, here's what I got Christmas shopping, or here's my vacation photos. I can't give you a percentage, but I'm of the opinion that you should throw in a certain amount of the personal. When I think of the personal brands online, the personal brand representatives to whom I best relate, who I really like, and who I follow and who I want to see more from, they do a certain amount of that, and I like it. It gives me, because remember what we're talking about here is the power of connecting with a real person. Well, part of what makes that person real, and again, something a persona can't do, is that person does go on vacation trips. They do go shopping. They do discover a new wine that they like. You don't want to overwhelm with that, but I think those things can be part of the humanizing that make that personal brand even more effective. I really can't think of a case, of an example of someone who has annoyed me or turned me off, unless it was by something expressing extreme political opinions or something like that. But we're just talking about the normal sort of slice of life kind of sharing that they put in every once in a while in the midst of their business related content. I think that works to their advantage. What do you think, David?
Well, I'm actually going to bring up an example of this. I agree totally with you, but it's funny, Mark, because you and I have met personally and we've exchanged views professionally and personally again for a long, long time now. But the first time that I actually thought of reaching out and contacting you, I found your articles on the web and I was following you on G+ a little bit, but I wasn't really taking part in the thread. And then you posted something which was purely personal, and it was about a street carnival you were on with music. Yeah. And you posted a link to a YouTube video. And that was the first humanizing touch. I sort of reached out and talked to you after that. And for me, that was a catalyst. And before that, you were just another, industry professional whom I kept on my radar. But I didn't feel any sort of connection or any desire to reach out and have that kind of extended contact. And that sort of proves the power of that personalization stroke humanization which you're talking about. And that video, which was a short one, really had a great impact on me in terms of your personal brand, because I thought somebody who's willing to do that is a lot deeper than just somebody who does SEO. And let's not forget, at the time when we first connected, SEO had also a lot of negative connotations in terms of the tricks and sort of the technicalities that were being pulled. So that sort of makes the case of exactly what you just said.
That's fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard that story from you before. I didn't realize that. That's great.
No, it's I haven't told it before, but I think this is it just sort of shows that was a catalytic point for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just to emphasize the fact, if you're going to be using these Hangout on air things, Marilyn Moore is agreeing the idea that the interactive aspect really does make all the difference. And then Eric has a nice softball for me. Where would Eric Enge, what would he do if he wanted to learn about how to run a Hangout on air? He would
he would do what Eric Enge actually did.
Yes. He would come and get trained with someone such as myself, or come into the Hangout Mastery membership group. That's a wonderful place to do it. So the tool that we've got is a vehicle. And so once you get used to it, and what I like to say, the technology disappears, then you can really focus on your message. And that message is helping you build the trust that people need to have with you. I'm going to bring up, Mark, a comment. I'm just going to read it because it was this was one of the comments that Samuel Scott left on your article, Mark, on Moz. Okay. And he was saying that if he sees a comment from Widgets Inc., that just strikes him as odd, because he feels like he's interacting with a faceless, robotic organization. But if I see, quote, John Smith or Jane Doe from Widgets Inc. commenting as themselves, then he's much more interested in what they have to say. And he says he'll also be more likely to see their profiles and then wonder for whom these genius people work. And that's sort of the path and the trail, I think, that we're trying to get across, the idea that a brand, if they're represented by a PBR, personal brand representative, that people will connect with that person, and then they'll move along that path into the realm of checking out the company. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there's levels of degree to that. I do want to say that it's not impossible, and it is advantageous to humanize your brand to your brand channel. And a lot of great brands are very successful at that. Coca-Cola, for example, does a great job, I think, of going into conversations on social media as the brand, as Coca-Cola, but doing it in interesting and amusing and engaging ways that help humanize the brand. Now, I think, again, what I'm saying, I think the biggest advantage is going to be when it's more personal, just like Samuel had said. But I do want to say that, there's degrees that you can go to where it will work even with the logo.
So this brings up an interesting point, and we're going to almost have to be wrapping this up because of the time constraints I put on this. We had talked about in the other show the idea of not only trust but also this phase-in process, that we're not trying to say as a brand you need to abandon your other efforts and just stick it all right here in this basket of social. But if you have the depth of what we call your bench is deep enough that you can grab somebody and try to get them into the realm of being your representative, primarily as your representative, because it's going to take a lot of time. That this is a phase-in process that is important. Do either of you, Mark or David, want to comment on the ability?
Yes, actually, I mean, I think the context you're bringing this in is in terms of marketing personas, where a brand creates an artificial construct which allows it to begin to personalize partway and partially its marketing efforts. And the question was that at the time was that, do marketing personas have a place in marketing anymore when we're in a social media sphere? And although the answer is very temptingly no, actually it is yes, because we do need a transitionary phase, and this is exactly what they provide. A lot of brands are still not comfortable giving all the power of their marketing to a person because it entails trust, which has to be built inside the company as well as outside with the audience. So having a marketing persona in the first instance, which allows a brand to experiment with a friendlier voice, a more personable tone, greater trust inside in terms of its marketing team, greater trust outside in the ties that it fosters with its audience, is a very important stepping stone towards the point where they suddenly say, okay, we don't need marketing personas anymore. We're ready to make that very direct connection with our audience.
And I think another stepping stone is in terms of the time investment. And I know that's a concern a lot, and I want to speak here on behalf of small businesses. When they hear this sort of thing, they say, well, that's great, pontificate about that. That's great, big brand can do this because they can just hire somebody or they can just resource somebody to do it. I run a small business, there's 3 people in our office, and we all have to do everything. We fulfill the orders and we build the website. Now you're telling me I've got to be full-time online. And no, I think you can transition in by adding this into what you do. Even if you spend, say, 20, 30 minutes a day just engaging in conversations as yourself, prioritizing, finding where the important conversations are happening and becoming a part of them, getting some content out there on a regular basis, but you don't have to be every day. Again, that's a step in that direction. As your business grows, you've learned things then. You've experienced what works, what doesn't work. So when you get to the point where you can invest more in that, either for yourself or someone else, to be more, spend more time on that, you're going to do it more effectively. So don't feel like, if I can't spend all day online, it's not worth even trying this.
Right, and a comment, this is from Carl, saying that he believes we need to consider a hybrid brand where we are merging the personal and corporate brand to be more effective on social media. That's part of this transitionary concept. And then Craig has one that the connection made with the logo can be worthwhile, yes, indeed, but the connections made with the people behind the logo is always going to be more significant or significantly more powerful.
I was going to say we have a case study on this actually with Stone Temple Consulting, where both Eric, Enge, and Mark represent the company at a very personal level. But when you actually see the company itself as a company with a company logo, sharing content and interacting, you get a sense of who they are, primarily because of Mark's and Eric's involvement in the social media sphere. So you don't feel that you're being marketed to in a very sort of one-way street way, and you're more receptive to the message that they actually put out, and also you're prepared to give them the trust required for you to unlock the value of their content.
All right, let me throw in one little thing to wrap up some of this conversation, give you a tactic that you might be able to try. And that is using this Hangout on Air broadcast tool. Once you've got to the point where you understand how to make it work and it's working well for you, then I would encourage you as an organization to bring in some of your employees and introduce them to the viewing public. Now, it's going to do at least two things for you. One, it helps you personalize the brand because people get to see who is fulfilling those orders and those kind of things, who's writing these blogs. Then it also, the other part it adds for you is the ability for you to review the video later and get a little bit of a feeling as to who has the gift of gab, as Mark likes to say. Who is the one that's going to be able to relate visually as well as verbally on the fly? And this tool can also, in essence, help you identify the strong points within your organization. Who are the people that you want to try to help develop into this personal brand representative? So any last points, Mark?
I think that's a great tip, Ronnie, and I certainly support that. We've been at Stone Temple. We've been doing this now for a few months. We haven't yet done it with a Hangout, and maybe we will, but we've been doing it with video. We've been bringing in, we have all. It's not just Eric and me. We have this whole stable of incredibly talented and smart consultants who work for our company, and we've been bringing them in on 3 to 5 minute videos. We call it hardcore SEO video, where we ask them to share one thing that they've learned or that they know about in just 3 to 5 minutes on a video, and those have been very popular. And it's giving us that chance to get more faces out there and more exposure for people to begin to learn, like, wow, Stone Temple, it's not just Mark and Eric, but there's this whole team there who are incredible people, and we want to give them even more exposure in the future.
So David, any final thoughts you could share with us?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. I think it's key to remember that trust goes through 4 phases, and that's contact, perception, assessment, and connection, and they're all critical to get from stage 1 to stage 4 and actually make that very human connection. So every attention to detail must be given, and there's really no shortcut to this. You really need to put in the time, effort, and above all, the thinking and intent.
Right, and I'm going to emphasize with a comment from John Ellis saying that it's good points. It also empowers your employees,
Yes.
which I believe is another valuable aspect of doing what we just talked about. So thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you again. And remember, Hangouts is your tool that will shortcut your ability to bring forth some of this trust that you're able to do as a brand and as a personal brand representative. And thank you very much, David and Mark, for joining us, and all of you for watching live and interacting, as well as those that are watching the recording after the fact. Please feel free to add comments and questions in the event, and we'll do our best to come back and address them as efficiently as we can. Happy holidays to everyone. Thanks.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care. Have a good Christmas.
Yes, thanks, David. Bye.